to another episode of the One of Us podcast. We're so excited that you're here with us today. Today, we are continuing the dating series. We're going to be talking about dating misconceptions. We're going to be talking about breakups. We're going to dig deep on when, how, and why to engage in a breakup, some dating norms, some societal pressures. We're just going to really dig in. So I'm excited. So I wanted to start off this podcast by going over some dating misconceptions that we received, both from you guys, our audience, and also some of the popular ones that we just know of just from personal experience. Do you guys have any that come to mind?
I have one. Actually, always hear from time to time people say that even if they go through the most traumatic things with their significant other, that based off the length of time that they've been with the other person, they can't break up or they can't, I guess, end the relationship because they've been dating for so long.
Yeah, that is a common thing, and I think it's just as you build those emotional ties, right? I think people just think it's harder to start over than to continue, but really that's not the mindset we should have, right?
Yeah, and I think even another thing, sometimes people stay in the relationship because they don't want to hurt the other person, knowing that the other person doesn't feel the way they do. And so they stay to prevent hurting that person, but end up hurting themselves. And in the long run, will, be hurting that person as well.
I also think it can be problematic because I think a lot of people try to think about marriage, right? When the going gets tough, you need to show your commitment. But I think in a dating scenario, you have to be very careful because you are not supposed to subjugate yourself to abuse just to say, oh, I'm actually pulling forth commitment, helping this relationship get better. If anything, you can just be setting yourself up for the other person to be complacent in their actions.
Another misconception that I saw was that dating will solve your loneliness. What are your guys' thought on that?
So someone shared this with me one time, and I would rather be alone, like not have someone and be alone, rather than be with someone and be lonely. And I think a lot of times people think that when they get with someone that, they'll be okay, but they still find themselves lonely within the relationship. And again, you shouldn't get into a relationship to you know, fill a hole in your heart. Rather, God should be filling the holes the holes in your heart. So I think it's better to just be alone than to be with someone and be lonely.
Yeah, like what you said there about I kind of want to unpackage feeling lonely with other people. I felt that way even hanging out with friends. Sometimes I've hung out with some friends and I never felt really involved or I never did an effort to involve myself. So the whole time I felt very lonely. Um, so I think I just kind of want to unpack that. What do you guys mean by alone when you hang out with someone or you're with someone?
I think there's being alone, which is like, by yourself, physically, emotionally, mentally. And I think there's lonely, where you can be in a room with people or, with friends or a significant other and still kind of feel you're not understood. You don't really
Yeah.
have someone to share things with, be vulnerable with. You can't open up to them. You can't come to them with your feelings or your emotions. And so you might be there, but you feel like you're just existing.
Yeah, I'd say it correlates to maybe feeling unseen, unheard, misunderstood, or maybe even going into it having the expectation that the other person will meet like all of your needs, all of your social needs, emotional needs, mental needs, everything in general. And when that doesn't happen, you feel isolated or you feel lonely. So I think it could be a dynamic situation as well. Another one that I saw was that when you find the one, it'll be really easy and it won't require work.
I think with any relationship, there's going to be work. Even you think about your relationship with Jesus. You have to put in work. You have to take time to be intentional. You have to take time to read your word and not just read your word to read it, but to read it to, let the words settle into your heart and, soak into your mind and apply it to your life. Anything and everything, it's going to require work. But the great thing about being with someone, or as people, want to say, the one, is it'll be nice and easy. And the fact that when you're going through something or when you're working, they're going to want to work with you, where you're not going to be fighting each other, but you're going to be learning and growing and working together. And I think that's where you'll find that, oh, it's easy, even if it's something that's difficult or hard, if you're in a disagreement or something. But if you're both working on it together, that's where the simple and the easiness comes in.
Yeah, I have a lot of opinions on this dating norm of the one. I mean, the one's not even mentioned in the Bible. There's no set person you're meant to marry. Maybe God knows it from eternity past, but it's not necessarily, it's more so like a, without a lack of a better term, a fairy tale, right? But not to rain on anyone's parade. I do think that there's people that you meet that will align with your lifestyle more than others. And I think that is something that you should look more towards. But I think the only one for your life is Jesus Christ. And I think that following his will for your life will inevitably lead to a life worth living. I would argue that, people always think about what it means to find somebody who edifies you, but I would argue that you shouldn't find somebody who is the one, but you should be the one, in quotations. Like, you should be that person who goes the extra mile for the other person, who is emotionally strong, emotionally aware, is healthy, doesn't engage in sin. That you should be that person. And I believe a lot in the law of attraction, where if that's kind of what you're doing with your life, you'll slowly meet people who kind of do that in their lives as well. So that's what I would say about the one.
Yeah, and I want to add something, Juan. Crystal says this a lot, and I actually really like it. It's not having a relationship that's transactional. And, what's meant by that is when I give something, it's because I want to give it, not because I have this expectation that I'm going to get something back. And I think that's where, like you're saying, Juan, when you do something, you're going to attract those types of people. And once those people start coming around you, or you start coming around those people, that's when, you'll find that person, and, you'll start pursuing a relationship and everything. And they're going to have that same mindset that they'll give to you because they want to give to you, not because they feel they have to, or that they're wanting something in return, and vice versa. And so I just wanted to add that, because I love hearing that, where, even God gives stuff knowing that he's not going to get anything in return. He went on that cross and people are saying, crucify him. They're throwing lots for his clothes and everything. And what does he do? He says, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. Knowing that he wasn't getting anything in return in that moment, but genuinely because he loved.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree with that. And I would also add that I think the person you marry ends up being the one, for you. Obviously, there's some instances in life when that is not the case, but in general, I'd say the person you marry becomes the one because it's the person that you end up striving to understand, striving to see the strengths in them, striving to see how we can be a team, work together. Um, and so I really think the person you marry ends up being the one. But yeah, there's definitely people in life that will be more compatible with you than others. But I really liked that point about transactional, Vic, because that's definitely something we want to stay away from, especially in this dating season as well. Kind of changing the topic a little bit, going towards if the relationship leads to a breakup, what does that look like? Let's maybe start with reasons why maybe someone would break up. I know we talked a little bit briefly about the beginning about how sometimes people stay in certain relationships because they want to be noble, right? They want to be extraordinarily forgiving. They want to, they feel bad for the other person, X, Y, and Z. What would be reasons why someone would break up in the dating season?
I would say, like, outside of probably abuse, I think abuse is obviously a common one, or like a no-brainer if you're being physically abused, emotionally abused, spiritually abused. I think obviously displacement, but are you getting at, Crystal, what are some reasons that some people don't think about?
Yes.
I'll share some reasons that maybe a relationship has run its course. Again, when we date, you date for marriage, but just because you are dating a certain person does not mean you have to marry that person. The season of dating and courtship, like we talked about, is to see if this is a person you can grow with and do life with. And this is the time to figure it out. I'll give a few examples. I'm sure there's a lot, but I'll say what I'm thinking, and then Tati, Crystal, Juan, if you guys want to share any points or add on, you can. But one, I would say, if there is a point where this person is continuously choosing to sin, and not a person that is saying, I'm struggling with this, here's what I'm doing with it. That's one thing. But someone who's choosing to sin and is not doing anything about their sin and is now bringing you into their sin and causing you to sin, that is a big red flag where, I would have some questions. Someone who is not diving further into their faith with you, someone who's not pursuing a relationship with Jesus. They're just, I would say, someone who's just comfortable, stagnant, they're lukewarm. Someone who's lukewarm, I'd be a little bit cautious about. I think those are big ones. And again, something else I want to say is just, if you have a disagreement with someone and they're wanting to work and they make a mistake, you work through it, okay? So don't think that because, oh, they made a mistake or they might have sinned and they repented for it, you're like, oh, I'm gonna wash my hands, dip out of this. No, you work through it, and that's where you use the discernment. If you or that person are trying to do better, they're repenting. But if they're continuously choosing and they're not seeking any accountability or help, then that's that line.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was getting at, essentially. And I think of a verse that Paul says in 1 Corinthians 5 9 through 11. And I think this is NLT or NIV something, so it's a little bit more modernized. But it says, when I wrote to you before, I told you not to associate with people who indulge in sexual sin. But I wasn't talking about unbelievers who indulge in sexual sin or are greedy or cheat people or worship idols. You would have to leave this world to avoid people like that. I mean that you're not to associate with anyone who claims to be a believer yet indulges in sexual sin or is greedy or worships idols or is abusive or is a drunkard or cheats people. Don't even eat with such people. Obviously, Paul, gets at kind of the jugular with this. And this doesn't mean, you don't forgive, you don't essentially associate, but it's saying, especially in this interaction, I would say correlating it to dating, that if, your partner is someone who is characterized by some of these things, and like what Vic says, is doesn't have a repentant spirit, but it's an ongoing thing, then I don't think that person at that point is suitable to be a marriage partner, which is the point of dating, right? People grow, people change, people, you know, do that. But at that point, I think that might be an instance to like step away, because it's hard for people to heal or grow sometimes when they're within the relationship.
Yeah, like what you said, I think the key word there was indulge. Not that, I mean, we all fall short of God's glory. It's just if the person is, you know, intentionally indulging in such acts. And I think that, bad company corrupts good morals, right? The proverb. So we need to understand that if your significant other falls down a path where they're making you compromise on your faith, perhaps it's time to, pull the plug. And I'd like for us to kind of transfer the conversation into, how does a godly breakup work out? How would you, let's say this, how would you, if you were going to break up with someone, initiate it in a godly way?
Look, breakups are not fun. I don't think there's any way you're honestly going to be able to break up with a person. And some people take it well, some people don't. It is what it is. But I wouldn't go into breaking up with someone and pointing the finger. I'm breaking up with you because you did this, XYZ, dot, 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 because it kind of tears them down. And you don't want to do that. I think it's okay to be honest and being truthful. Like, hey, this is something I prayed about. This is something, I've thought about. I've, sought counsel and wisdom and, for the reasons of XYZ. I just don't think our morals and values are aligning the way that they were or I thought they were going to. And now our paths seem to be going in different directions. And, to continue to pray, like, I hope you find someone and hope everything goes well. But this is where the relationship ends. And look, none of these conversations are good. None of these conversations are fun. But I wouldn't lie, but I wouldn't be so harsh with the truth if, like, hypothetically saying, the other person, you know, you broke up because they were, indulging in sin or something. I wouldn't tear him down, but I would still try to remain truthful, but still following God's will and, using discernment and wisdom.
Yeah, I'd say too, a lot of times people go into a breakup thinking, I'm just going to spare their feelings. I'm just going to, make some cliche statements like, oh, it's not you, it's God. And that may be true to an extent, but I think being like having helpful honesty in the sense of allowing people to understand exactly what took place so that there's closure and they can take that into the next relationship. Ultimately, in a relationship and in a breakup, you want to leave the person better than you found them. Just as Christians, like you want to be a positive presence, right, in the other person's life. So I think that translates even to this sense of, be honest, go into the conversation prayerfully and thoughtfully. Don't go in obviously wanting to be, rude or short just because it's the end. Um, but wanting to give some clarity, I think is important too. Because I hear a lot of people saying, like, I have all these questions. I have no idea. I don't really understand why. So I think owing it to them to just explain a little bit more.
Yeah, like what you're getting at is the sense of closure. I mean, I would counterpoint and say that sometimes you can be as clear as you possibly can with someone in a breakup and they still may be confused or not accept, the circumstance. And in that case, I would just recommend anyone to point that person to Christ and to the church. I think that breaking up, kind of like how everyone's been mentioning, isn't an easy task. And it, let's just be honest, you're ending something that you and another person had created. But my biggest forepoint is that unless I think in all situations, you should always bring everything up to God. And if kind of how we discussed earlier, some of the points of what would cause a breakup occur and you bring it to the Lord and your community, and a lot of roads are leading towards a breakup, that you would take that step faithfully with God and that you would kind of give up that person to the Lord. And, sometimes in breakup, I think a lot of times people think that you can't be friends or there can't be anything outside of what you guys have had. But I think that in itself is a misconception. Sometimes in breakups, depending on how it happened, obviously, but there's a lot of people that I know that have had a breakup and they still remain friends. And I just want to give that light to some people that just because a romantic relationship, a courtship ends, doesn't mean that a friendship or a brother and sister in Christ one should still exist. Because kind of like what we said in the previous episode, right? Shameless plug, that you should treat everyone as a brother and sister in Christ. So sometimes we get fearful that if we, initiate a breakup, that would push away someone from you. But I would honestly say that that would show more about that person than yourself because you're just obeying the Lord and doing what you believe is right for your walk with God.
Okay, so I actually have some hypothetical scenarios for you guys. Stuff that, I personally have gone through and stuff that I know friends have gone through when ending relationships. So, one scenario that I have is a person that you're wanting to end the relationship and the other person is not. And they're trying to tell you, I'm going to change. I'm sorry, I can do this, I just had a moment of weakness, or, things like that. And, you go to them and you're telling them, I've brought this to you before and you didn't want to change, but now we're getting to the end. And it kind of pulls on your heartstrings where you're going, okay, maybe I'll give them another chance.
I would say don't make a decision out of that desperate moment, right? Can you hinted towards it, but have we been here before? Have we had this conversation before? Was it a one time thing or is it a character thing? And then if you are getting your heartstrings pulled in that moment, it's okay to just, step away, have some quiet time with the Lord, go, you know, if you need to process a little bit more with community or in whatever circumstance and then come back. I think that's okay. But if you already know, like, the Lord has already told you the path ahead, or you just don't have peace anymore in the state that you're at, I think you kind of have to be strong in that moment. It's tough, it's emotional, but you just kind of have to be strong, right? And be obedient.
So, how would you encourage someone? You're saying strong, but be strong how? Like, what are some words of encouragement you can give to someone who has gone through that or is maybe currently going through that? What can you tell our people?
I mean, honestly, I like what Crystal's saying, right? The key word is habitual. I think, God wants us to give grace and forgive, but I think ultimately the question is if there actually is change being done. Sometimes when people engage in that conversation, they try to make it sound like, hey, I'm trying my best and you have no grace. But if the person doesn't actually do a life change, and what I mean by life change is actually taking practical steps to change their mind, meeting with people from the church, praying against what they're doing, or putting barriers or steps to avoid situations like that in the future. If they're not really doing that, what more so they're saying is, hey, I'm sorry that it happened again, but they don't really have a resolution. So what I would tell with anyone in those moments where your heartstrings are being tugged, I think kind of what Crystal says, like, you kind of just have to let the other person know, like, hey, I just need to bring this to the Lord and really bring it towards your community and the Lord, because you know kind of going off of Crystal's point in desperation, if you make if you make decisions based off your emotions, more often than not, you're probably going to make a decision you regret. I think if you take a step back and think about it logically, I think God would give you a great direction. Um, I guess a caveat that I would put to your point, Vic, is that you know you don't owe the other person anything. If I'm being completely honest, you just owe them to be a good witness for Christ. So sometimes people feel like burdened, or they feel that they can't leave them shattered, but I think you need to put your, like, remember in the first episode, you need to put the relationship that matters first, which is God. So you need to always tell yourself, is this relationship hindering me from the Lord or pushing me to God? And if it's just like a habitual thing that keeps on going, then I think that person should know their answer.
And as an encouragement for someone maybe going through this, thinking about this, or have experienced this in the past, I would say too, something that could be helpful is putting some boundaries or structure around that conversation, like saying, hey, I'm going to give this, 30, 45 minutes. Obviously, have grace, flexibility if things, need to go longer. But sometimes it can just go back and forth so much that it ends up being emotionally exhausting and not productive anymore and not helpful. So I would say, say what you need to say, give space for the person to respond. If you know your decision and you're going to follow through and be obedient, even if it's hard and emotional because it is someone that you cared for or care for, I would just say, hey, you know, this conversation can't continue right now. We're both not, being helpful anymore. And so I'm going to go be with the Lord, be with community, do my thing, have someone pick you up, don't be alone after that instance on either side of the coin. Um, and I would say, you know what you need to do. 9 times out of 10, like, people know the decision they need to make. It's just a hard one, so they don't want to rip the band-aid. if that's the point that you've reached. Sometimes it is a little bit more challenging and difficult and nuanced. And so I'd say if you're feeling, confused, you're not sure because of the conversation and the emotions that arose, it's okay to take some time and just go back and pray and discern and chat about it. But that's kind of what I meant about being strong, is knowing what you're going to do when you go into that conversation and setting boundaries so that it's not so emotionally taxing.
Okay, let me hit y'all with another scenario. Person A is dating person B. Person A decides, I'm going to break up, I'm ending the relationship, all that jazz. Person B hits him with, I can't lose you, I need you. If you break up with me, I'm going to do XYZ. How would you help someone in that scenario? And obviously, I believe that falls under abuse. But what is something you would tell that person? Hey, here's something that would be encouraging to say, but also would help you to not be in a relationship like that.
Look, in the words of Sean Kingston, somebody call 911. Shawty fired
No,
up. Okay, honestly, if someone's threatening to KMS, I would actually call 911 because I think that's a serious thing. Some people do actually attach themselves physically, emotionally, and they have created this facade, which honestly I think is from the devil, that they can't live without the other person, which is a dating norm that we can kind of dissect a little later. But if someone's kind of hitting you with that, I think it's even more foretelling of why the relationship should end. If someone has placed you at such a high idol that they themselves can't even function without the idea, because I want to separate like the notion of being in a relationship and you as an individual. If someone is so obsessed with the couple that you form with somebody, but they treat you as an individual like trash, they're more in love with the idea of you being in a couple with them than your cares or needs. So I would say that I would just encourage whoever's in that unfortunate event to pray, remind that person that that what the Lord says about them, that they're loved, that they're cared for. And if it comes to a dangerous situation, use your critical thinking, call 911, call someone who knows them. But if they're just saying those things to kind of emotionally get you to say, okay, I'll stay with you, um, don't fall for it.
Yeah, I wouldn't respond to that emotional blackmail. Obviously, you know the situation best in that instance. I would probably call, like what Juan said, that person's friends or community to come over and be with them. I would remind them of who they are. Hey, we are breaking up. That doesn't mean you are unworthy, unwanted, unloved. You are seen, you are special, and I will not respond to that emotional blackmail. And you just have to go from there. But I think if you want to make sure that they have people with them once you exit the situation, I think that would be helpful too. But if there's, obviously this is a different conversation, but if there's a plan in place, or they're talking about how or when or what is going to happen, I do think you would have to contact emergency services. I think most of the time people just use that as blackmail, but have discernment.
I think what sucks about those situations are that they're sometimes unforeseeable. Because in an ideal world, if you knew that they would react that way, then you can probably plan a lot better. But yeah, it's definitely a stressful situation.
And I would say to the person hearing that, like the person breaking up with the other person, hearing, that kind of threat, I would say you need to keep a calm demeanor. Sometimes people get really angry and they respond to statements like that with saying, do it then. I don't care. I'm leaving. That cannot be a part of the equation because you never know what people are going to do, and you don't want that. You want to keep your side of the street clean, and you don't want to have that on your conscience. And even if God forbid something like that does happen, never blame yourself. That is not your fault. But I would just keep a calm demeanor, try to de escalate. That's just like a de escalation tool. When you're chill and kind of here and still being loving, um, it brings the other person down from kind of the point of eruption.
Now, on the same light, what I would say right now is, what do you guys think you would do for your brother and sister in Christ who just recently dealt with a breakup? Like, what really helps them in that season? Like, that they can do personally, or what can you do as a friend helping someone dealing with a breakup?
I think it varies for each person. So, it's just kind of getting to know your friend. Um, Juan, Crystal, Tati, you guys have been with me in mine. And for me, I love when you guys reach out and ask, you want me to come over? You want to have a night? You want to go out and do something? I love that because sometimes I'll be like, yes, help me get my mind off this right now. Or sometimes, they've reached out and I've responded, hey, honestly, I just want to be alone right now. And I love that you guys have respected that as well. I love the checkups. I love getting the text, hey, thinking of you today, praying for you. That makes me feel really loved. And I think even other people would appreciate that, of just checking in. Hey, how you doing today? You need to talk about anything? Need to get anything off your chest? Need help processing? You want to go out? You want to get some ice cream? You want to just play some games? You want to go for a walk? I think it's just knowing your friend and knowing that you're available for them is the best thing that you can do.
I would agree. I'd say probably just being consistent, right? And knowing your people, like what Vic said, like how they will respond, how they best feel like comforted, or, just having space to decompress. And sometimes when people are asked, like, what can I do? They may respond with, nothing, I'm good, I'm fine. So you just have to know, like, do I need to just show up? Do I need to just ship an Amazon box of just spa items? Do I need to just call them and be like, hey, I'm here. I'm not gonna talk, but I'm on the phone if you just need to say anything. Um, so you need to know if you need to be a little bit more initiating that or just being available as well.
I think prayer is big too. Even if you
Amen,
don't do it
sister.
directly with the, even if you're not praying directly with the person, I think that praying for one another, even from afar, is, it could do so much. So
Yeah, I think as the friend helping someone who's going through that season, I think you should just wash them over with prayer and remind them that they're worthy, and also be available to hang out with them. I feel like in the recent breakup, people are really vulnerable to like dating pressures, dating norms, dating someone really quick, like a rebound, or getting into a really bad habit that only deteriorates you. So I would just say, as the friend to someone who recently got is dealing with a breakup, to really shower them in prayer and really try to be available for them and with them and do life with them, because I feel like sometimes in a breakup you feel lonely, because I think sometimes the enemy confuses us to think that we can't have deep friendship or community like some of the ones you've had in a dating relationship, but you can really have unique, nice, intimate moments with your friends, not relationship wise, but you know what I mean. Um, that can really spur up the moment for people. And what I would say for someone who's in that season is to really take advantage of, if you broke up with someone, to really pray to God and ask God, like, hey, what do I need to better myself for? And if you were broken up with, to really take in consideration your brother and sisters, whoever broke up with you, right? What they said to you, to really think about like why they broke up with you, and to bring it to the Lord and ask yourself what had happened there. Now, if someone broke up with you in a malicious way and they just kind of did it because they weren't having their way, I would just say to pray to God for forgiveness, because a lot of hate can brew from somebody who once cherished your heart and then crushed it like it was nothing. There could be a lot of emotions there. I would just ask that person to pray to God for forgiveness for the other person, and also to have your mind strengthened. Strengthen that, that wasn't the end, that God has greater things in store for you, that it's not that everything that has occurred, as it says in Romans 8:28, for all those who love the Lord, that all that occurs is for your own good. So to not feel defeated when you got a bad situation or dealt a bad hand.
So, what do you guys think if you're dating someone and everything seems to be working well, but you just don't feel that chemistry with the person?
I think there are instances in life where I've heard people say, I'm going out with this person and they check off all the boxes and everything's fine, but there's just something missing. There's something that is missing from this. Maybe there's, like what you're saying, no chemistry, or maybe our conversations are a little bit duller, or maybe X, Y, and Z thing. Um, Obviously you have to determine, is that something you can live without, that like element of chemistry? And if not, I don't think there's anything bad with not continuing in a relationship because you just knew that there was something missing. And maybe that's because you're just not in that spot or like season, or like, ready for that relationship. Or it just means, hey, like, it's okay, this person's a great person, a great man or woman of God, but they're just not the person for me. And it's just clear that the Lord isn't leading me in that direction.
All right, I'm going to say this from my male experience, so no one hate me for saying the next few statements. But anyways, what I mean to say is this. So, this is my belief, right? God gave us sight. Well, I shouldn't say sight. God gave us senses, right? Because some people weren't gifted with sight. Okay, Tati, don't look at me like that. But anyways, some people we were all born with senses to experience this world, right? To experience like the goodness of God's creation. But I think through our senses, we can also, meet somebody and feel a sense of attraction. So I do think, I know some people find this very hot take controversial, but I do think that physicality, to an extent, right? It shouldn't be the absolute biggest thing. It shouldn't be I wouldn't even argue should be in the top 5 things, but I would say that physicality, attractiveness, right? That what you find is an important thing. And I think that even if you meet someone who's really great, but if they don't create that sense of attraction for you, then I wouldn't try to make something work, because I would argue that you're settling, or you're kind of fishing for something lower than what God has in store.
Or you're trying to make them something that they're not to fit your mold. And that's not fair to them either, right?
Yeah, I would say that too. I mean, sometimes you might find like a slight attraction and you explore the situation, but that's the point of maybe the early stages of getting to know someone, slash maybe you did end up dating, and you realize like, hey, it's just not clicking. And that's fine to end a relationship over those terms. I don't think you're
Mm-hmm.
shallow. I don't think that, I mean, it's not like you're breaking up with someone and you're no longer friends. I think if you break up in a godly manner where you continue that brother and sister Christ friendship, I think it's honorable to come to that self realization. Because if you're not, I don't want to say 100% sold, but if you're not truly attracted to the person, then I feel like you're doing that person an injustice, because they are expecting you to be at least attracted to them.
There are societies, cultures, and people groups that do dating a little bit differently. Sometimes there's like arranged marriages and stuff like that, or arranged couples. And obviously, in that situation, attraction can grow. But again, we have free will and we don't have to choose into that.
I think it's a nuance for sure, right? Because in the Bible, people got betrothed, and in our United States culture, we get to meet people, and God has given us that liberty to pursue who we wish to pursue. I really like that question you said, Tati, because it's like a mixed bag of emotions. Sometimes it's not so black and white. There can be a lot of gray in between. And I think that every day is like a learning experience. And that's why I said there's sometimes a fallacy when it comes to dating. Sometimes people are like, well, we've been together for like 6 months and I'm trying to find him attractive, but it's not working. So I'm just going to stay in the relationship because I've been there for 6 months. That's like a wrong way of thinking things. You don't have to stay in a relationship. You can still be friends. You just have to be honest with yourself as the days transpire. Don't try to force feelings upon yourself because I think you'll end up becoming jaded towards the person or towards yourself.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate just a little bit. What about the verse where it talks about how vanity fades?
Well, that's why I was saying that attraction isn't the number one thing. Or it shouldn't be in the top five because obviously as you get older, you age. But I think ultimately, well, it's hard because we're talking about chemistry, but there's more that comes into that than just physical appearance. It's also how someone has their demeanor, their mannerisms, how they kind of take themselves when you hang out with them. If somebody's like socially awkward and you're very much of an extrovert or you're very adventurous in spirit, I would argue that that kind of diminishes your sense of attractiveness towards that person. And that has nothing to do with physical vanity or appearance.
And I would say too, God created attraction. I mean, if you read the Song of Solomon, like attraction is like created by God in that whole situation. Like, so there is a space for that. And I think it's God created, which is what leads to love a lot of times, which is what leads to romance, which is what leads to X, Y, and Z other thing. I think it's an element, like what Juan's saying, it's not the most important and it will fade. So going into it maturely, if you think, hey, my attraction can grow, then you can do that. But I think what we've been saying, it's a free will thing. You don't have to. It's not like you're a horrible person if you choose, hey, there's something missing here in terms of the chemistry. Not only just, oh, I don't like that they have this or that they look this way and that. I think that's kind of superficial, but it's usually never just that one thing. It's usually like maybe it's an appearance thing, maybe it's also a personality thing, maybe it's also X, Y, and Z thing. If it's just literally like 99% of everything else, just literally like what they look like, I don't know. I mean, you have free will there, you can make that decision, but I feel like usually it's not that. Usually it's compounded with other things.
I like it. I kind of actually want us to transfer into like dating norms. I actually have a really interesting question because I've heard this, I guess I've heard people say this and it's really been concerning towards me, but I just want to know what you guys think because some people really believe it. But let's say you're dating somebody and that guy tells you that you can't have any other friends that are guys. What do you guys think about that situation?
So, how I feel about this question is it's okay to have friends. For me, I have a couple of guy friends. An example, Juan. Is Juan a threat to anyone I would be dating? Absolutely not. Why? Because he's like my freaking brother. He's married to one of my best friends. We don't have a past or a history. And even with some of my other guy friends, I don't have a past, I don't have a history. And when I look at them, I genuinely think, oh, brother. Did we have the same mother? No, that's it. Again, it's different if my guy friends were guys that I've dated in the past, then I could understand their hesitancy and maybe why they would feel uncomfortable. That would be, I feel like that's understandable. Even with dating someone, I think there has to be some boundaries. Like if I'm dating a guy, I'm probably not going to go and hang out with my guy friends one on one. Am I going to stop being friends with them? No. If they call me, I have nothing to hide. I'll put them on speaker. I'll let, my new guy talk to my guy friends. Why? Because I have nothing to hide. And again, I said it in our last dating series. I don't want to live two separate worlds. I don't want to have my dating and I don't want to have my friends. I want it all to be one. I want it all to mesh. I want it all to come together. I don't want to live two separate lives. So, and again, I want my friends to be their friends. I would hope that my brothers in Christ would be able to be brothers to this guy that I'm also dating.
And I think your partner, whoever you're dating, also should make an effort to want to be around your friends and get to know them to the point of, being comfortable. Because, too, sometimes when a person comes really strong in that direction of like feeling threatened, it's a self esteem thing and it's a self image thing and it's like a they problem. I don't think it's really fair to impose that on the other person. Yes, you want to be obviously respectful and weary of appearances in all interactions 100%, but also I think that person would need to kind of sit with themselves a little bit more and be like, okay, why am I so threatened when there's nothing? Because I know there's instances, I know you mentioned not hanging out alone, but there's instances where Juan has hung out alone with you or Tati or whoever, other friends, and literally, do I care? 0%, like negative 1,000%. You know what I mean? But it's because one, it shows that there's trust in a relationship and that there's literally zero, and it shows that we're secure people too. Obviously, am I like interacting with like people that I met one time and going out to like dinner with them by myself? No, but I really have no desire to do that. Um, but yeah, I definitely think it's a balance. It's like you should be secure in who you are. You should have trust in your relationship. You should be putting your best foot forward to get to know your person's like people, like their family or their chosen family, like their friends, and trying to be comfortable in that area too.
I did like what you said, Crystal, because I felt that if someone were to limit you on who you can hang out with, I felt that that's them trying to take from your life, not edifying your life, which is weird. And I like that what Vic is saying, like you would expect and hope that the person you're dating would want to be friends with the friends that you currently have, and vice versa, obviously, which I would assume, like if you have friends, obviously they're going to try to be friends with the person you like. But I mean, yeah, I think a lot of it is a self image and a trust issue. I think that, I mean, we're all Christian, right? We are being honest with one another. If someone can't trust you with the opposite, like, gender, I mean, that's just like the tip of the iceberg. What else can't they trust based off their own image, right? So, I mean, I would just argue that having that train of thought is more defeating and can show more cracks in your relationship than there has to be. And I think it's controlling, right? You don't have the right to tell someone how to live. Like, just because you're dating, you're not someone's husband or wife. I think that's very, very, like, you're treading on dangerous waters.
And I think too, you need to be careful of those controlling attributes if you start to notice those like happen a lot. Because like what Juan said, this relationship should add to your life, should like be a beautiful thing, like coming together and like growing, not like killing you, like not killing your vibe, essentially, like not like like completely transforming like what makes you you. What are some other like Christian dating pressures that you guys think exist for the modern Christian?
Maybe dating age or like married, like being married by a certain age.
Yeah, Tati, I really like your question. I do think that there's a pressure, for Christians to, I guess, get married at a certain age. And I'd actually pair that pressure with the pressure of also getting married quickly. I think that marriage, people say it all the time. It's probably the second most important decision you'll make in your whole life, right behind saying yes to Jesus. So obvious, and let's be honest, there's a lot of fruit that is given and a lot of goodness that is in marriage. I don't want to diss marriage for any second, but I think that with good intentions, that pressure can lead people to make rash decisions. So, what I would say with that cultural pressure is that don't feel that you need to make a decision out of desperation. I mean, I've met countless people, Christians, right, who've been married 50 years, which is amazing, right? But still, who've said that their first handful years of marriage was probably the worst they've ever lived in their whole life. And I just find that really depressing. I think that, you know, marriage is a blessing, but you should always be prepared for it. You should never throw your preparation and caution to the wind just to try to experience marriage faster. I think that's what really buys you those horrible years. I think that when people are encouraging that on your life, you should really take a step back and ask yourself, am I even ready for that stage? Am I prepared for that season in life? Am I who I'm dating? Are we ready for that season? If any of those are like no, and you're jumping into marriage and saying whatever shortcoming God is going to supplicate, I think you have a very prosperity gospel view of the Bible, because it you kind of will reap what you sow. Don't be I guess, swindled by, like, will God have grace? Of course, but you know, don't be swindled by, I guess, false promises and antics.
What are some other like pressures in dating?
What do you guys think about, um, like, including your family in dating? I guess that's not really a pressure, but I'd say when you're first dating someone, introducing them to your family. What do you think about kind of that aspect in the Christian realm?
I think that's definitely a part of the process and an important part of the process. I know some people wait a certain amount of time or have a certain like system and how and when they do that. I don't know about all that, but I think like what Vic has been saying this whole time, you don't want to live two separate lives or three separate lives or four separate lives. You want things to, come together organically. And in order for that to happen, there needs to be exposure. And so even if the first introduction is, you guys as friends, or if you're already in the dating season, obviously, I hope that your family was some level of counsel for you. I know not all families, that's not able to happen in all families, and not all dynamics are like that, but I definitely think it should be part of the process earlier on. I don't know. I know some people wait like years. I'm like, I don't know why you would do that.
I do have a question. I think we briefly talked about it in the past, but what is your guys' perspective or take or biblical view on missionary dating?
Do it.
Heck no.
Do it.
No!
Just kidding.
No. Look,
It's a meme for a reason.
and I will say there are instances where it has brought the other person to Christ. I've seen things, but that is not because it was your doing or your work. That was because God took something and turned it for good. I would not advise or recommend missionary dating because it is not a promise that they will come and know the Lord. And if they do know the Lord, you have to ask the follow up question: are they doing it for you, or are they doing it because they want a personal relationship with Christ? I don't think missionary dating is wise. I don't think it's right. And sometimes it's hard because they check off the boxes. But again, there's that one unchecked box. Do they have a personal relationship with the Lord? And that is a big box. Sorry, guys. I'm not with it. Don't do it. My opinion.
I feel like people who engage in mission dating are the people who, like, culturally maybe have a savior complex, right? Like they have like I'm gonna fix that person up. I know they're broken inside. I can fix them. I feel like those are the people who usually engage in those situations. But kind of echoing what Vic said, I wouldn't. I think if you are someone who's intentionally dating someone to save them, I think you have a really bad perception of what a disciple is. So I that's like not biblical at all. If that has happened to you, or that's just how your marriage happened, I'm not saying that there isn't grace that abounds, but if you're telling me, do I think that's how God wants people to be saved? No. And I think how Vic captured it beautifully is by saying, like, God turned the situation for good. So that's what I would say. And I would say if you're in a relationship with God that started off by someone pursuing you, to ask yourself, hey, if this person disappeared off the face of the earth, would I still be pursuing Jesus? But yeah, honestly, Victoria, everything you said was amazing. But with that, this will conclude our majority of the topics that we've talked about in our dating series. So we do want to do one extended episode to our dating series. If you guys have any questions regarding any of the topics we talked about or some that we've missed, please DM us personally on our Instagram or engage with us on our Discord. At the end of this video,
Or in the comments below.
or in the comments below.
It's at oneofus.podcast.
On all
Boom.
platforms where you listen to podcasts, and also on Instagram, TikTok, all the things.
So please shoot us a message. We really enjoyed the first episode. It looks like you guys did too. So just shoot us some questions and we'll kind of go over them as before. But now, since these topics have been sizzling, why don't we go over to hot take time with Tati?
Hot take time with Tati.
Do you think it's acceptable to take breaks in relationships for personal growth?
breaks? You mean a
Is
breakup,
this
right?
no, like you know how people say, "Oh, we're on a break." I think that's dumb.
A break is in we're not talking, we're not dating, but we're on reserve for one another until we come back.
I would say no. I'd say breaks are. Sorry, guys. Ross and Rachel, they were not on a break. I know that's pretty controversial. Everyone's like they were on a break. They were not, because breaks
I
don't
just don't
exist.
breaks don't exist. It's either you are together or you've broken up.
Also, it's kind of sad because like I feel like that's also a self-image problem because let's be honest, you're telling someone to not better their lives if something better comes along because you want to make sure, like it's just kind of like it doesn't make sense to me. It just sounds like you're being petty or you're withholding someone. Again, it's like you're taking from someone's life. That's just kind of sounds like.
Also, hypothetically, let's say you get married, you can't take a break in marriage. So why would you want to practice that in dating? It's not something you can do. So why are you going to practice something that holds no purpose or value for a better, healthier relationship or potential marriage?
I think organically you can say, "Hey, this day I really just want to spend time with the Lord. There's a lot of things I need to think about." It's not necessarily, we're
It's
going
not
on a
that.
break for
They're
an extended period of time. No, but to do that, I think is healthy, but to do what our culture would say is a break is dumb.
It's acceptable to remain friends after a breakup if it's healthy.
Yes.
I I am friends with one of my exes now. I will be honest, it was not a good breakup. It was rough, but we had the same friends. We eventually moved past it, worked through it. We are good friends now. We are brothers and sisters. I I went to his wedding with his wife, who I am also friends with, and they invited me to their their baby dedication. I think it is acceptable. It is totally doable. Does it happen with everyone or everything? No, but there are ones where it does work out, and honestly, it's still really beautiful to see. And even though it didn't work out between him and I'm really happy for him and his wife, and now their baby daughter, who they're going to dedicate this weekend. And honestly, it's still amazing to see. And I'm happy for him, and I'm glad that I'm still part of his life, and I've gotten to see how he's grown and the prayers that he's prayed for have been answered. So I think it's doable.
Amen, amen. I will say if well, I guess this wouldn't constitute as a healthy breakup. Like if it's a healthy breakup is you guys are in a good understanding and you guys can still be friends, but I think I don't know if you have like an unhealthy attraction or you just can't see the other person with someone else, then maybe not. But I think that would be really sad.
All right, guys, that concludes this episode in our dating series. We have more to come, but stay tuned. We love you guys. Have an amazing week. And we look forward to the questions that you ask us, and hopefully, we get to answer some more. But stay safe out there. Listen to the other podcasts because they're also just as amazing. And we'll see you guys soon. Bye.